Well, good morning from Mexico City. Good evening for our audience joining us from Kyiv and from other parts of the world. And welcome everyone to this discussion entitled From Alaska to Tianjin, the World and Peace in Ukraine. My name is Raquel LÓPEZ-PORTILLO. I'm the Secretary of the Youth Program at COMEXI. And on behalf of COMEXI and the lIko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation, I warmly welcome you to today's panel. This conversation, as we know, comes at a crucial time. As we know, recent diplomatic meetings, the shifting public sentiment in Ukraine, and renewed international debate all remind us that the path to peace is not only about complex negotiations, but also about principles of justice and security. Together, we'll explore today where current diplomacy stands, how Ukrainians see the conditions for ending this war, and what prospects remain for a lasting and just peace. Now I will proceed to introduce our very distinguished panelists. We have with us Ms. MARIIA ZOLKINA, Head of the Regional Security and Conflict Studies at the lIko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation and Associate Research Fellow at LSE Ideas at the London School of Economics. Welcome, MARIIA. We also have with us Professor OLEXIY HARAN, Professor of Comparative Politics at the National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and Research Advisor at the lIko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Welcome, Dr. Haran.
Gracias.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Taras ZHOVTENKO, Executive Director of the lIko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation and Associate Professor at Grinchenko Kyiv University. Very welcome. You're welcome here, Dr. ZHOVTENKO.
Thank you very much.
So now we will first hear from each of them with opening remarks, then we will proceed with questions from the audience, and finally we will conclude to some reflections. So without any further ado, let's begin with you, MARIIA. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Raquel, and many thanks from my personal side and from our institution, DIF in Kyiv, to COMEXI for being so responsive and being really good in organizing collaboration, not for the first time between our organizations. So we are very pleased that this is working well, and we are glad to share our knowledge, and we are open to absorb any knowledge. We can absorb from our colleagues back in Mexico. So just to start from the very basics, I'll make an overview of how it's from Ukrainian point of view, and more broadly from European partners of Ukraine point of view. We assess the current situation, the current diplomatic disposition of all the players when it comes to Trump diplomacy in response to Russia-Ukrainian war. First and foremost, we have to say that the very first idea of which we discussed almost half a year ago, the idea of diplomatic blitzkrieg against basically Ukraine, has failed. This diplomatic blitzkrieg was basically considered to be kind of a push on Kyiv, starting from the point of view that Ukraine is in relatively weaker from Trump administration point of view position, and at that time this kind of diplomatic pressure on Ukraine to start compromising, basically not just negotiating but compromising about the conditions, how the conflict might be stopped, or what Ukraine should secede to reach the end of the war, or at least the ceasefire. This kind of a tactics, which was in place half a year ago at the very beginning of Trump term, has failed immediately. And mainly that was linked not just to the situation inside Ukraine, to public opinion and resistance to severe compromises or concessions towards Russia, about which my colleague Professor Haran will be speaking later, but also because Europe became on the one side of the story here with Ukraine. So it appears that there can't be no diplomatic pressure, there can't be no pressure about making any concessions about territories, security guarantees, just when it comes to Ukraine solely. But all the consequences of this kind of concessions Trump was willing to make Ukraine agree to, these consequences were directly impacting the security of European partners of Ukraine. And that kind of alliance, deeper alliance between European partners of Ukraine, in particular coalition of willing, where political leaders are UK and France mainly, this kind of coalition emerged and started responding to Trump's approach to how should we try to establish a basic for a ceasefire, for instance. So this is one very important point. So from Ukraine's point of view, there was a huge pressure which Ukraine resisted to, not just for the fact of resistance, but basically because the logic of Ukrainian diplomacy, based on Ukrainian public opinion and the history of Ukrainian security policy, was that, okay, ceasefire is possible, but let's speak simultaneously at the very moment we are discussing the very idea of the ceasefire. Let's speak about the conditions of the ceasefire, the monitoring and verification mechanisms, and guarantees, specific security guarantees, which will allow maintain the ceasefire once it is politically agreed. Because the main fear of Ukraine, starting from the very beginning of the year and until now, is that the idea of de-escalation will be just a declaration with no real mechanism of how to secure this ceasefire on the ground anywhere in Ukraine, when it comes to the sea, when it comes to air attacks, when it comes to air space, and when it comes, of course, to land operations. And until now, there is no answer to this question, clear answer. What specific mechanisms will be used? However, what do we have? What kind of dynamics do we have now, especially after and around Alaska summit between Trump and Putin? So Trump has been changing slightly his instruments, which he has been using in relation to Ukraine and Russia here. However, generally, so less pressure on Ukraine, speaking basically. However, generally, the very idea of Trump administration, at least from this side of the ocean, is that he's still willing to negotiate and make a deal. Just instruments which he is using now are less pressing and less harsh than they were like half a year ago. So he still wants to redirect responsibility for ceasefire or any kind of maintenance of de-escalation on the ground towards European partners of Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to be, interested in making this deal as well. And for this reason, trying to make this deal possible, Trump is still, from my point of view, just presenting pretty loyal, pretty sympathetic tactics towards Russia. What do I mean by these loyal tactics? Trump has made one significant step which changed a little bit or might change significantly in the nearest future. The very position Russia has been occupying in the international arena. By Alaska summit, Trump has allowed Putin to end the era of international isolation of political leadership of Russia when it comes to at least Western world. And this doesn't mean automatically that Russia will be welcomed anywhere else in Europe, for instance, or let's say in Western democratic world. However, it is a significant step when it showed that Russia is not considered to be, and Putin personally are not considered to be by America first and foremost like a pariah anymore, which was important diplomatic signal present in the air and in practice for 3.5 years before Alaska summit. Next important point here is that Alaska summit and the dynamics between the very beginning of Trump term and an Alaska summit was that Europe still trying to present something to Trump, some proposals, to develop some proposals how Europe will be participating in organizing new security architecture around Ukraine and for Ukraine, meaning that this is part of European security architecture, not just some creature for Ukrainian situation. But these attempts has been pretty modest if we speak strategically. And the main obstacle for our European partners and Trump to have a full agreement on that matter is that European partners of Ukraine still cannot, leave behind the time when that was US leading pro-Ukrainian international coalition, the time when US was the political leader of Western, generally speaking, states, but not just Western states, just supporting Ukraine and repelling Russia's attack. And under these circumstances, kind of lack of political leadership for strategic, fundamental, completely new, brave political decisions, this lack is kind of present right now. However, European states are trying to balance between two, let's say, two points of view. On the one hand, they try to keep Trump administration with his diplomacy towards Russia, to keep Trump still at the table, even if in the role of a moderator, like Trump wants, but still at the table, and not show his back on Russia-Ukraine war at all, leaving Ukraine and European partners of Ukraine just one-on-one with Russia. But at the same time, European partners of Ukraine want US some kind of guarantees, American guarantees for themselves if they are offering Ukraine the security guarantees like Trump wants. And here, I think, is the strategic problem, so kind of magic circle. The logic of US is that US is less participating, but European partners are more contributing to organizing a ceasefire, for instance, monitoring the very front line in particular, providing Ukraine with some security assurances, if not guarantees, to prevent another Russia's attack on the ground. However, European states trying to postpone or avoid escalation with Russia in the future still want US to be some kind of a guarantor for themselves if they are dealing with Ukraine on the ground. Step by step, this problem, I believe, will be overcome. And even slow, but we do see the positive dynamics here, because right now military and defense staff of Ukraine and coalition of willing are negotiating about operational plans, how to make this work. And another important point here, so just logically arising from the pretext and the context I have described, is that one of the very positive signals and outcomes of not Trump meeting with Putin, but of Trump meeting with Zelensky and European leaders after Alaska summit, was that European leaders succeeded, in my opinion, politically and diplomatically, to refocus the conversation with US from just making concessions to have a deal, to make a deal with Russia, because these concessions will be on, as Trump sees this, mainly on the side of Ukraine and Europe, to another focus on how this security guarantees should look like. Because the main fear and the main risk was basically is that the very idea of having a deal with no details how it's going to be implemented, what political, territorial, security-wise price Ukraine is going to be needing to pay for that, So this kind of situation was left behind and was avoided. And trying to balance between what Trump wants, what Europe can offer, what Ukraine can sustain and maintain. So the European leaders really succeeded to make our conversation in this triangle, Ukraine, Europe, and US, to make to directly focus on how this monitoring mechanism should look like. And moreover, right now, even if we still lack clarity, but conversation is already about at least some role US will be or possibly will be playing in providing these security assurances, not guarantees, but rather assurances and monitoring mechanisms in Ukraine. So it might be some kind of intelligence sharing, or in a permanent perspective, just without, bargaining about this, whether they will share this or not, whether they will block this data sharing or not, but just, in a longer term perspective, plus military aid, plus verifying with satellites or drone system, verifying what will be going on the ground if there is a ceasefire once agreed. So some kind of US participation in those security mechanisms proposed for Ukraine in the package with a ceasefire deal. This is being discussed, and this is not a perfect situation, but at the same time something better than we had even several months ago. And to sum up, just with some predictions or some prognosis, I hate doing this honestly, but taking into consideration logic of Russian diplomacy towards Ukraine starting from 2014 and diplomatic, process here, starting from 2014, keeping in mind the logic of European diplomacy now and American diplomacy now, where we also see some kind of trends. I have to say that the logic and the very idea of Trump doesn't seem to be working when it comes to the idea that once there is a deal between Russia and US, basically about Ukraine and Russia-Ukraine war, this deal, even if it's agreed and made by Trump and Putin with, some consideration and agreement on the side of Europe and Ukraine, this deal will not bring any kind of political divorce between Beijing and Moscow, which was the very original idea and logic when it came to our American partners. So the practice about which my colleague will be speaking more in details, the practice shows, in my opinion, pretty the opposite. So Russia has been benefiting from America's will to make a deal and try to receive in response, even without, offering something significant on the ground, trying to bargain as much as possible in response, while absolutely not reducing their Russian relations with China. China, at the same time, has significantly intensified its relations with European partners, trying to be, I call it a silent voice. So they are raising their voice when it comes to how the security architecture will look like, but at the same time are not, are not presenting their position when it comes to, circle of parties participating. They want to be present and their position to be considered, but they are trying to diplomatically play with these differences now present between, US on the one hand and European partners on the other hand. And the last,
Maria, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the time is up. If you want, we can continue this bit of your intervention during the next round, so all of the speakers can have the same time. But we will really appreciate these very valuable insights. I'm sure you can cover the rest during the second section or during the Q&A section. But now I would like to turn the floor to Professor OLEXIY HARAN for his intervention. I'm sorry, Doctor, you're muted.
So basically, I was saying muchas gracias, so that's understandable. And also, I see Brazilian names among the participants, our colleagues, so muito obrigado. Okay, I will talk about public opinion in Ukraine. Therefore, I need to share my screen. Here it is. Okay. And when we are talking about the present situation and all diplomatic negotiations, the pressure on Ukraine from Trump, I think it's important to understand that it's not about, President Zelensky who doesn't want to have peace for some reason, but actually what President Zelensky is doing, he is relying on public opinion within the country. So Ukrainians do not want to yield. Yes, we are tired. We are very tired because every night in Kyiv you have air alarm. You have almost every night you have bombardments. This is very nervous. I am not. This is in Kyiv. I am not talking even about what's going on nearby the front line. So let's start. So we are very tired, definitely, and exhausted. So, but let me start with the first slide because I categorically do not agree with the title which was given by Gallup News. So what we see on this slide, we see that there were two alternatives for those who was polled. So one, to continue fight until Ukraine wins the war, and the second, to have negotiations to have the war as possible. So you see here that the number of those who want to have negotiated peace definitely is increasing and is about 70%, according to Gallup, while the number of those who would like to continue until the victory is 24%. Okay, so there is a change, in the moods of Ukrainians here. But this title, Ukrainian support for war effort collapses, I think it's totally misleading. Because under this title, it was spread not only in the world news, but also in Ukrainian news. Why it's misleading? Because what we have right now, yes, we are tired, but we are not going, to stop fighting. So we are ready to defend our country. Ukrainians are ready for that. So you see that this is Gallup, this is Razumkov Center. So on every slide you see who conducted the poll
We don't
and when.
see it. We don't see it. Actually, I don't see it listed. So on.
Have you seen the previous slide?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay, so
Because I don't. Sorry.
Yes,
just...
let me check again. Share. Let me check again. Friends, do you see it?
Yes, now we do. Thanks.
Okay, great. So this is a number of those who believe in victory of Ukraine. So you see it's very high, but the question here is what is considered by the victory, and we will see in a moment, because here we have different approaches. So when Ukrainians were asked, are you ready to give up to Russia Ukrainian territories, some Ukrainian territories, it's not specified here what territories. You see that 11% are ready to do that, okay? And almost 15% are ready to sacrifice pro-Western vector of Ukraine for the sake of negotiated peace. But 57% said no, nothing of what was mentioned here is acceptable. So most of Ukrainians are against giving up Ukrainian territories or giving up Ukrainian course to NATO or to the EU. The question about how long are you ready, to wage this war, to endure this war? So number one answer is as long as necessary. So you see, definitely it's less than it was at the beginning, you know, or even at the beginning of 2024, but it's still, you know, it's still high, 60%, as long as necessary, okay? The question about territorial concessions, here there are some different figures, but still, you see, you have 52% are saying no, nothing. We are not giving up to Russia, nothing. The first question is 38% are ready to have territorial concession, but in this question, it's not specified what specifically territorial concessions. So there was another question here. Oops, pardon. I'm sorry. So, okay. Do you see it now? So the question is the continuation of the previous one. Are you ready to recognize officially, from legal point of view, occupations made by Russia? Because we know that this is Russian demand, that Ukraine needs to recognize that everything which is occupied by Russia is part of Russia. So 68% of Ukrainians say no to that. Now, Russians are making also demand that Ukraine should withdraw from even from those territories which are not occupied by Russia at this point, that are Ukrainian control. I mean, first of all, part of Donbass, but also Zaporizhia and Kherson region. So Russia demanding from us to withdraw from these territories. 78% of Ukrainians are saying, no, we are not going to do that. So the question, is a compromise possible from Ukrainian side? Yes, the compromise is possible. And you see this, the third one question, de facto recognition of occupation without de jure recognition. So Ukrainians are not ready to recognize the occupation legally, from legal point of view. But we understand, at least, you know, half, because it's divided, half and half. Almost half of, well, 40% plus, they are saying that we can de facto recognize the occupation, that we are not able to liberate these territories right now. So, and this will come in case of ceasefire, because if we have ceasefire, Ukrainian position, we should do it along the front line, which would mean freezing the conflict, which would mean the territories we agree for some time to recognize that part of Ukrainian territory, 20% of Ukrainian territory, is now controlled by Russia, and we don't know when we would be able to liberate it. So this is a compromise from Ukraine. Not everybody accepts this compromise. You see that relative majority is also against it, but almost another half is saying, well, we need to recognize it. So, and this would be a compromise from Ukrainian side. You need to understand that it's very, very painful for us, because with every day of the occupation, everything Ukrainian in the occupied territories is terrorized by Russia. But, you know, this is very, very hard decision. We are ready to accept it, at least for some time, freezing the conflict. Now I would add that Ukrainians are still in favor of joining the EU and joining NATO. It's a bit less than it was at the beginning of the war. This is beginning of the war, but this is higher than it was before the war. So Ukrainians basically made this geopolitical choice. And finally, about support to president, does it exist? Because this is really important. we are ready for painful compromise, what would be reaction from within Ukraine? This is a very good, this is a tough question, actually, because again, these are painful compromises from our side. So we see that the fluctuation of support to Zelensky, it was 90% at the beginning of the war, then it became less, then it increased again. So, and you see that whenever you have pressure on Ukraine, such as from Trump's pressure in March of this year, support for Ukrainian president is increasing. So now it's a bit less, but still I would say it's higher. Fourth year of the war, and almost 60% of Ukrainians trust President Zelensky. At the same time, we are very critical of what he is doing. We are critical. So I do not exclude that there would be change in these numbers. But as long as there is a pressure on president, pushing Ukraine towards even not compromises, but concessions, which would be very dangerous to Ukraine, most people are saying that Zelensky is trusted. And this is very, very important. So we cannot ignore the public opinion in the country, which is still ready, to fight for our independence and for our sovereignty. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Professor Haran. And now let us hear from Dr. Taras ZHOVTENKO.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, for your insightful presentations and reports. I would like to pick up from one point that Maria have said about the Trump administration and the geopolitical logic, which to some extent guides the political strategy of Mr. Trump and his approach to attempting to negotiate peace deal in Russian-Ukrainian war. So the first thing which we have to remember, and the first thing which we have also noticed here from Kyiv, is that the current geopolitical logic of the Trump administration is based on an attempt to monetize U.S. foreign and security policy. And this is the logic which Trump administration tries to apply to both try to shift the bilateral relations with the American allies, to shift the American priorities and the American membership in different international organizations and international unions. And this very monetized approach, Trump also tries to apply to peace resolution of Russian-Ukrainian war. And this is something that the Kremlin and Russian President Putin have seen from the very beginning. And it also reflected directly on what started to happen on the battlefield during the Russian summer offensive campaign. So despite the Kremlin's attempts to show that they are ready to negotiations, they are willingly welcome Mr. Trump's special envoy, Mr. Witkov, to Moscow, and the Putin's own envoy, Dmitriev, to the United States. Kremlin tried to systematically take over as much of Ukrainian territory as they could. And they were knowing exactly what they were doing, because one thing which made them thinking they would succeed was the continuing support from the North Korea and the continuing flow of weapons and the manpower, which Russians were not using as much on the battlefield, but they were using North Korean manpower to free some other Russian citizens and to make them sign contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense and send them to the battlefield. So during the summer offensive campaign, we have seen that Russia continued to amass the troops. Russia continued to systematically ignore any huge casualties they were having during these summer months of fighting. And we have also seen that Russia was escalating its campaign of drone and missile strikes on Ukrainian cities. But it's very interesting to note that during the most important periods of direct negotiations between Washington and Moscow, for example, when there were the visits of the envoys, or when there were the phone calls between Mr. Trump and Russian President Putin, or especially before an Alaska summit and after an Alaska summit, we have seen the significant pause on with the Russian terrorist strikes on Ukrainian civilian cities. And that means that Russia utilizes and sees these drone and missile strikes as an instrument of political warfare. And this instrument of political warfare, just as what Russia continues to do on the battlefield, is tied directly to Kremlin geopolitical strategy. And this strategy is based on utilizing this business-like approach to foreign and security policy, which Mr. Trump and his administration are practicing. And in this case, Kremlin was trying to simply buy itself more time and wait till the end of the August and start of September, till the summit of Shanghai Cooperation Organization will start in Tianjin, and till the Russian president had a chance to meet China's Xi Jinping in Beijing during the military victory parade. And the Kremlin's hope was that Mr. Putin's contacts with Mr. Xi and India's Prime Minister Modi, and of course the North Korean dictator in Beijing would first of all would be a chance for Russia to replenish all the casualties and all the losses they have suffered during the summer months of campaign. And Russia was trying to occupy, as I've said, Russia was trying to occupy as much of Ukrainian territory as it could, because Russia, on the one hand, was trying to prepare itself for some potential negotiations of the ceasefire, if it came to that. But we have also seen that Russian President Putin was doing his best to try to avoid not only the agreement on a ceasefire, which Trump administration was pushing along with the European allies and along with the Ukrainian official position, but Putin also managed to break the union and the unity between the European allies and the United States in terms of what comes to economic sanctions and the continuation of economic pressure from the European and American side on Russian Federation. So we have seen that first of all, the Trump administration was just postponing its own economic sanctions, which were to be aimed against Russia, giving Russian president the next 2 weeks just to see if the Kremlin is really eager to negotiate peace deal. And we have also seen what turmoil it started within the European allies, because looking at the position of the White House, part of European countries was eager to wait when US President Trump shifts his opinion and would eventually agree to impose additional sanctions against Russia. And the other part of European allies was eager to proceed without any prolongation and without any further waiting from the changing of position from the American side. And Russian President Putin was also trying to utilize the Trump's obvious unwillingness to put some kind of anti-Russian sanctions and to increase tensions on Russian economy, doing it unilaterally, because Trump has many times spoken that his good relations with Russian President Putin are really actually key from Mr. Trump's point of view to negotiate peace between Russia and Ukraine. And we have seen that the Russian President president was utilizing this to his own benefit. So when it comes to how the summit of the SCO and the military parade in Beijing influenced the prospects of peace negotiations in Russian-Ukrainian war and influenced in general the regional and geopolitical security situation, we must say that, and we must state that unfortunately Russian president has got what he wanted from his visit to China, and in terms of how Xi Jinping and Indian Prime Minister Modi have discussed, and seemingly they have agreed on joining efforts, first of all financial and economic, to try to put something against the US economic pressure, US sanctions, first of all imposed against India, and to join efforts to somehow oppose the in general Western economic pressure which was about to be put on any other countries which continue to buy Russian oil and Russian gas. And so Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi Jinping had agreed to join efforts, and he gave them an opportunity to, first of all, for the Beijing to proceed with his own strategy. And this strategy was made public by remarks of them. China's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Wang Yi, who it seems to me something like a month ago, he said that China is benefiting from Russian war against Ukraine, and China cannot afford itself to appear in a situation where Russia loses this war in Ukraine, because for China, Russian aggression, continuing aggression in Ukraine, is an instrument to keep the United States within Europe, and to prevent the United States from shifting their priorities and resources to the Asia-Pacific region and to defending Taiwan and other American allies in the region. So clearly for China, Russian-Ukrainian war became a geopolitical instrument that it was made public. And the union between China and India, first of all, the economic union, because we must also stress here that we are clearly sure that Mr. Modi does not share Mr. Xi Jinping's geopolitical ambitions, and he has far less interest in continuation of Russian-Ukrainian war. But nevertheless, this economic union gave China more support to its own geopolitical ambitions, and it was expected that this agreement with India would in turn give Xi Jinping more will to give Russian President Putin green light for escalation in Ukraine, which sadly we are witnessing right now with the escalation of Russian drone and missile strikes. And also, I think that another risk was created by these events in China, public events in China, and the agreements which were reached there. Another risk was created for the eastern flank of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, because we are seeing that Russia is trying to utilize their military exercises Zapad 2025, which are about to be launched in Belarus, to make some hard hybrid provocations on the eastern flank of NATO. And it again complements this Chinese strategy of keeping security tensions in Europe and trying to keep the United States within Europe and preventing Washington from paying more attention to what's happening around Taiwan. So just to sum it up, my short prediction is that the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine and with Russian terrorist strikes on Ukrainian territory would intensify, sadly, and the eastern flank of NATO should be well prepared for any other escalation and actual clear and present threats from Russian federations, as it was seen on the night of the 10th of September, when Russian drones, tens of Russian drones entered Polish territory. So this is one of the first steps in this escalation, which Kremlin certainly would push with against the NATO eastern flank. And it all makes my prediction that the security situation in Europe will further deteriorate, and that makes the possibility of negotiating ceasefire or starting a peace process of ending of Russian-Ukrainian war very, very slim. And our European allies, the coalition of willing, should really seriously consider an option of deploying this international military force in Ukraine without waiting for any possible ceasefire or the start of the political process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. ZHOVTENKO. We would like to remind the audience that if you have any questions for our panelists, you can send them through our Q&A feature. And in the meantime, I was thinking perhaps some of you might want to react or respond directly to some of the points raised by your fellow panelists. And we will wait for some questions from the audience. Dr. ZHOVTENKO, Dr. HARAN, ZOLKINA, MARIIA, do you want to add something to your intervention from your other panelists?
I just want to add a couple of things about the situation in Poland, because I do understand like the domestic logic back in our eastern flank of NATO, and particularly in Poland. So I mean, in my opinion, Russia has been launching, just to add a little bit on what Dr. ZHOVTENKO has said, Russia has been launching another section of its warfare back in Europe. And this warfare is not about conventional attacks yet, at least, on NATO member states, on European Union member states. But this is about bringing these societies to kind of domestic destabilization. And in my opinion, the drone attack which Poland witnessed and couldn't ignore was just the first step here. So this is the logic of the warfare when something undermining the very idea of sovereign territory and security of the state is being undermined and challenged on the one hand, like with drone attacks. But these methods are not sufficient yet for this particular state like Poland, or for the North Atlantic Alliance in generally, to respond with a severe methods like using the Article 5 of NATO. And this gray zone situation, when there is definitely violation of the very sovereign, airspace or the land space, is something which is very beneficial for Russia right now, because it knows all the fears I was talking about in Europe, fears in Europe that the European partners will be just one-on-one with Russia, with no participation of US, as it was considered to be the case before Trump. But at the same time, there is no response yet. And I think this is kind of a big challenge now, because it seems that there is no yet the ground to use Article 5 on the one hand, but on the other hand, let's imagine that Russia will continue the drone attack which happened with around 20 drones plus minus, going pretty deep into Poland's sovereign territory. And these attacks continue. And at some moment, the real question would be whether NATO exists at all, whether European security architecture, common security and defense policy within the European Union exists at all. If you can just launch drones and no one strikes back, no one does nothing more severe than just declarations, consultations. And I think this is very beneficial situation for Russia, because Russia wants to show that NATO does exist on paper only, and that no one will defend the member states if it is attacked. In terms of information space, Russia is working in Poland very actively, trying to show that they just find what are the differences within, Polish society, There is a Russian let's say voice when it comes to trying to make Polish and Ukrainians to be, you know, in kind of confrontation. So Russia is really using lots of its hybrid warfare methods when it comes to Baltic states, when it comes to Poland, and coalition of willing, which I was talking about. Because of that, is thinking not just about security assurance for Ukraine, but it's also thinking about becoming, in my opinion, a kind of mini NATO when less countries associating themselves with coalition of willing. They can be members of NATO, they can be not, but in most cases they are. When they like reissue one more time that if one of them is attacked, then they will, members of this non-institutionalized coalition of willing, will defend this one member. And the working scenario is Estonia. Russia started with drones attack on Poland, but coalition of willing is working on the scenario, what if Russia attacks Estonia somehow? Small country, geographically very easy to attack from Russian territory, and very difficult to defend when it comes to NATO capabilities. So this kind of, you know, an overview from the other side of Ukrainian border.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you to our audience as well, and obviously to all of you distinguished panelists for sharing such a rich range of perspectives. Before we formally close, I'd like to invite each of our speakers to share a final message, and especially to consider one thought you would like our audience to take away. I feel like for us, people that live outside Ukraine, we're very interested to know what you live every day in this war. What are your expectations? What are the sentiments from the Ukrainian people? So if you could include a bit of this apart from the international perspective that you so kindly shared, we would really appreciate it. So Dr. ZHOVTENKO, I don't know if you want to get started.
Thank you very much. I would be very brief, and I will again focus on the summit of the SCO in Tianjin and the agreements, certain agreements which were reached there, because they clearly showed that the geopolitical landscape is shifting. And while the United States of America are trying to monetize their own foreign and security policy, the SCO and China are trying to weaponize themselves. So we have seen that among the decisions which were included in the final communique of the summit were two things which drew my attention. And first thing was the start of the creation of the SCO Center for monitoring and analysis of international threats, regional and global threats. This is a kind of security substructure which hasn't been seen present in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization previously. So it's kind of an attempt of the Beijing to try to in a very soft mode to weaponize or start weaponizing the SCO. And the other thing was what Mr. Xi Jinping was talking about, the global government system, the new global government system, the global governance system. And what drew my attention was that speaking about this new global system, Mr. Xi Jinping had not in any case related to the United Nations Organization and to the Security Council of the United Nations Organization. So that means that from the Chinese point of view, this new global governance architecture is not going to be based on the United Nations Organization. This is something very alarming for both us in Europe, and I think that everyone should pay attention to this, because from what I've previously said, right now Beijing is trying to consolidate his allies, to consolidate his resources and his proxy allies like Putin's regime, like the North Korea, to try to push its own geopolitical agenda. And Beijing is obviously trying to push its own geopolitical agenda over the nations of the so-called global south, and it tries to utilize any means and any instruments it has at hand, just trying to catch a moment to while Mr. Trump is in the White House. This is a perfect moment to go on with some huge geopolitical ambitions like Xi Jinping has. So I think this is something which is very disturbing, and this is something which should be looked and analyzed closely, both in Europe and in any other part of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Haran, the floor is yours.
Well, I will briefly talk about Europe and support which is coming from Europe. We really appreciate it, especially in our joint communication with Trump. So this is really, really important. So it's incredible, incredible support. We are sure that European support will continue regarding the guarantees of, well, the guarantees of security support. What is coming from Europe? From Europe, it's weapons, financial support, sanctions, etc. We are sure that it will increase. Okay, so we may call it guarantees of security support, but these are not security guarantees. So whenever it's necessary to use real force, you know, Europeans appear to be not ready to do that. Okay, so basically, at this point, all this talk about European peacekeepers, boots on the ground, well, according to what's going on, it may happen only after ceasefire. So what Putin is doing? He is organizing provocation against Poland. So he's showing, guys, even do not think about boots on the ground. Even after ceasefire, even after peace. So it's, again, this is very, very painful to us. We are frustrated because we hope more decisive support from Europe. So at this point, it's really important how they will react to Russian provocation against Poland, because Russia is probing not only Poland, but also probing the West and the Europeans as well, to what extent they are ready to unify in strengthening their position vis-a-vis Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haran. Finally, Maria, ZOLKINA, we would love to hear your thoughts.
If I may, I will just give a floor to my colleague, which is dealing with with our Latin American partners, because I saw you asked for a floor, right?
I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Пане Володимир.
Ambassador Lakam. Okay.
Yeah. Ambassador Lakamov. So I just saw that he wanted. So we are very lucky.
Yeah, I was going to give the floor to him after your participation. Yeah.
You can start. I will. Yeah, later.
Many thanks to Ms. Carla and Ms. Alejandra for bringing us together with such care and clarity, and of course to Ms. Raquel López-Portillo for a brilliant moderation of our discussion. Our journey from Alaska to Tianjin was meant to reflect a global conversation. And yes, those summits helped us to understand the landscape, but they did little to change it. More insight than impact. That's why today we placed our hope, like Maria told, and other Ukrainian speakers. We place our hope in the coalition of the willing, or coalition of the resolute, those who choose action over hesitation and justice over delay. And of course, from Alaska to Tianjin, for myself, I could visualize as an express train with its meaningful stops, and Paris at the Élysée Palace, where coalition held its latest meeting, is among them. Its latest stop, and the train must now move forward. Ukraine is not just another station, it's a moral destination. A place where peace must be just and victory must be real. I believe firmly and without hesitation that Ukraine will prevail, because it fights not only for itself, but for the principles we all claim to defend. Thank you all for standing with us. Thank you. Gracias. Дякую.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We really appreciate your words. And finally, to wrap up the event, Maria.
In order to wrap up, I would say that we are still in the process of trying to find an appropriate solution for de-escalation. I would like, when we analyze the situation right now, when it comes to diplomacy around Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia-Ukraine war, to avoid, if we want to be sharp and precise, just to avoid the idea that the peace deal is something which is being discussed, because peace deal is a broader agreement, broader deal, strategic one, solving the very basic reasons why it appeared. And at this time, this is literally not possible, because positions of two parties, Russia and Ukraine, are pretty different, and they contradict so much that the peace deal as such is not possible. However, de-escalation is something which is being really discussed. It can be in the form of a ceasefire, formal, not formal, but even here, we do have a problem. So my idea is that we should assess trends rather than make all our efforts to analyze every particular statement, every particular saying, because if we assess the picture of Trump diplomacy towards Russia, Russia's position towards Ukraine and America generally as a whole picture, so we will find out those trends which we were talking today about. And last but not least from my side is that we are at the new era of when the conflict which everybody tried just to keep just within Russia and Ukraine. However, it was never just about Russia and Ukraine. It was about kind of redistribution of spheres of influence for Russia in Europe. But the spillover is already in place. We might neglect this, we might try not to see or accept this, but the drones attack in Poland is just the top of the situation. On the very basic level, so we do have informational warfare, cyber warfare, we do have attempts to undermine the security in Baltic Sea, which is again challenging what will be the reaction, towards Russia and Chinese efforts there. So this is kind of a whole picture, and Ukraine is just something which is on the news, but the solution is not in place, because this is about who should govern, which sphere of influence, and which country should be allied with what. This is how Putin assess the situation, and this is why Europe and Ukraine are not agreeing just to any kind of conditions which are being presented by Russia through Trump to them. Thanks.
Well, actually, I'm really sorry. I found the questions which came to us, but we somehow missed it. The questions from Vicente Ferrara. if we have
No,
time.
he just sent them a couple of minutes ago. If you want, we can have a room for one more question for all of the speakers, if one of you would like to answer it in interest of time. So Vicente Ferraro from the Getulio Vargas Foundation in Brazil, thanks everyone for the presentations. And his question is, if the war reaches a prolonged and costly deadlock, what kind of compromises Ukraine might be prepared to consider? I fully recognize that any agreement would be unfair to Ukraine, and at the same time, there is a risk that by not accepting an unfair agreement now, Ukraine could later face an even more disadvantaged situation and be pressured into accepting an agreement that is even less fair. Dr. Haran, I don't know if you want to answer the question.
Look, regarding compromises, I have told you, the huge compromise from Ukraine is actually to recognize the present, to freeze the conflict, because we understand that de facto we are losing these territories for some time. So I think this is a huge compromise from the Ukrainian side. If we are talking about the other question was specifically maybe my colleagues would like to add to that, because I need to find some sociological data to ask to answer the first question.
I can also answer. So Ukraine has already changed slightly its position, modified it up to current circumstances. So when Russia basically switched to the war of attrition, considering that the exhausting of resources, military, human resources, economic resources, will be really, reducing on both sides, but Russia counts that Ukrainian resources will be reduced to critical minimum much sooner than the Russian ones. So this is kind of, logic behind this war of attrition, which started in 2023, when active operations or active breakthroughs and movements on the front line were replaced by permanent pushing, tactics on the ground. So since that time, this is kind of a really logic to make Ukrainian situation on the ground to be like a deadlock. But first and foremost, Ukraine has, firstly, before this kind of Trump diplomacy at the beginning of the year, refused totally from speaking about a ceasefire at all. So it was just and only about security guarantees. After that, Ukraine has agreed for and offered like a kind of temporary ceasefire just to see whether both parties are willing that. And this ceasefire for 30 days never actually happened, because we didn't agree and Trump didn't, we didn't receive and Trump didn't receive an agreement on the side of Russia. So the framework for where Ukraine diplomatically, society and authorities are ready to compromise is to freeze the front line with active warfare also frozen, paused, without any kind of legal recognition, however, of those territories to be those belonging to Russia. This is the maximum Ukraine can agree. And all current attempts just to have some kind of a security guarantees from our partners is basically to prevent the situation when the very next day after a deal with Russia, Ukraine will be in a weaker position than it was before this deal. So this is to work in advance, to find, the solution ahead, to have forces on the ground, or to have monitoring mechanisms or forces on the ground, to have the airspace secured not only by Ukrainian air forces, but also by our partners' air forces, at least in the western part of Ukraine, which is definitely deep heartland and where civilian infrastructure must not be attacked anymore. So Ukraine is pretty aware that the worsening of the situation is possible, However, the situation on the ground is also not like Russia, trying to present. For this reason, being not able to occupy the rest of the Donetsk region for 11 years already, not just 3.5, but Russia started trying to occupy the Donetsk region in 2014. They failed with that and have been still failing. So for this reason, they're diplomatically, politically now demanding Ukraine voluntarily to withdraw from the Donetsk region. This is also kind of a sign for us as analysts that the situation is not as successful as Russia tries to present that. And Ukraine will not do that, not because of only and exclusively formalities or a constitutional background behind this decision not to withdraw from anywhere, but basically because this is about not worsening the conditions Ukraine will find itself if it does so. I mean, Ukraine cannot withdraw from the Donetsk region and open the road for Russia to the very heart of Ukraine, to the very center of Ukraine, to Dnipro region. So everywhere there is a logic to create a situation when frontline can be, or activities on the frontline can be frozen with no recognition of territories occupied by Russia as Russian territories, and simultaneously with having some mechanisms on the ground, to prevent another attack. This is the maximum compromise, and this is very logical one. I do see that at least we are moving, in this direction with coalition of willing and even with US.
Thank you, Maria. And finally, I see a hand raised from Alexander Sharov. Alexander, you can go ahead and say your question.
Well, in the meantime, may I try to answer the question about sociology, because the question was about is there any difference, regional difference in approach to the questions of peace and concessions, specifically about the situation in the cities, well, basically on the front line, because there are different trends here. So first of all, I would like to say that yes, there is quite a lot of sociological data who is publicizing region, the polls which are made, which divide by region. So everybody who is interested may find it. I mean, from Ukrainian sociological organizations. Regarding, I'm looking right now at the one of the questions put forward by Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, and they asked about so-called American plan, European plan, and European and Ukrainian plan, second, and the plan of and the so-called plan of Russia. So basically, in all the regions, Russian plans are rejected. If you look, to all the numerous, Russian demands. So if you put it in a package, they are rejected. Also, people are rejecting in the regions, including in the east. They are also rejecting, withdrawal of Ukrainian troops, specific questions like official recognition of the Russian occupation, like withdrawing from of Ukrainian army from non-occupied regions, and so forth. However, if you, for example, if you are talking about, well, so-called Trump plan, and we remember that for some time he was talking about official recognition of Crimea, removing sanctions from Russia in exchange for guarantees which are coming from Europe but not from United States. in exchange for move of Ukraine to European Union. So in this case, again, in all the regions, majority is against this Trump plan, but so-called Trump plan. But in the East, majority was in favor of it. So there are different combinations of these questions, and it depends on how you put it. So if you're asking about specific things, most Ukrainians in the East, they're also saying no. If you put it in a kind of a package that would stop a war, that would provide Ukraine with some gains, then the majority in the East may say yes to that. But again, it depends on the questions, so different polls would show different answers.
Thank you very much, Alexander. I don't know if you want to really briefly tell us your question in interest of time.
Do you listen?
What, sorry?
Do you listen me?
Yes.
Actually, this is not a question. This is a short comments, if you don't mind. My name is Alexander Sharov. I'm from Institute of Economics and Forecasting in Kyiv, Ukraine. And I would like to pay gratitude for all organizers for this is very nice events. Today it was spoken a lot about political factors of the situation in Ukraine with other partners and with enemies. But I think that quite important are economic factors as well. And I hope that next time you can organize such discussion about economic background, economic reasons or factors of behavior, different actors. Especially maybe Maria can help in this. I mean that LSE have a good knowledge and experience in such economic discussions. As a former research visitor at LSE, I know about it, that it will be nice if we can jointly, maybe with our institute as well, with experts of our institute, to organize such events as a next step. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. And on behalf of COMEXI and the lIko Kucheriv Democratic Initiatives Foundation, I would like to thank you again, to our guests, obviously, and everyone who joined us today. I think that conversation like today's remind us that the search for peace is both a political process, but also a moral imperative, and one that requires a lot of persistence, solidarity, and a clarity of vision as the one you shared with us today. So this concludes our session. I wish you all a very good day or evening, wherever you are. Thank you.